From August Marks gouging Bobby Munson's eye out in Season 7, to fan favorite Opie's brutal torture and murder in Season 5, here are the most gruesome moments in Sons of Anarchy. The series thrived on violence and murder, and every season featured at least one scene that made even the strongest of us pause the show and take a break from all the savagery. And one of those moments came in Episode 9 of Season 7, when Jax's plan to take August Marks didn't go the way he wanted it to. So poor Bobby got kidnapped by Marks' men, and the torture began. And it was brutal to watch, because not only did Marks' men break his jaw and cut his fingers off, they also gouged out his eye, which made viewers sick to their stomach. It was a horrifying moment for a fan-favorite character, but unfortunately it didn't end there. Because next up was Mark sending Bobby's bloody eye and a video of his torture to Sam Crow. Jax decided that enough's enough and negotiated a deal for Bobby's release. But when he went to fetch him, Marks pulled out a hidden gun from Bobby's belt and shot him right through the back of the head. Damn, and we're just getting started, folks. There's an endless list of shocking moments in the series, but one of the wildest ones is in Episode 6 of Season 5 when Carla shot herself in the head. She was introduced as an unstable, borderline unhinged character who did some gnarly stuff. But the worst part about her was her weird relationship with her half-brother, Nero Padilla. She was jealous of his relationship with Gemma and wanted him all to herself. So in Episode 6, she pulled out a gun and ordered Gemma to do something sexual with Nero in front of her. Nero told Carla to shoot him because that wasn't gonna happen. But she was in love with him and couldn't pull the trigger. So she turned the gun and shot herself in the head. It was a truly disturbing moment in a show filled with them. But that's the genius of Kurt Sutter, isn't it? He didn't shy away from real-world violence, which is why Episode 10 of Season 4 hit differently for audiences. It's where Clay and Gemma got into a spat, and it ended with him brutally assaulting her. Domestic violence is a really sensitive topic, and it's never easy to watch it if it's in your favorite show. But Episode 10 took it to another level. Clay and Gemma's marriage had been building to a fever pitch throughout the season, and when he told her that she needs to stay out of the club's business, things went from bad to worse. His taunt really hurt her, because he'd always needed her to show him the way. But then he told her that she's an old lady, and that she's always been that. And instead of taking it, she pulled out her gun and pointed it at him. He mocked her by saying that she'd kill him just like she killed her first husband. But before she could do anything, he grabbed her and started beating her senseless. It was one of the most sickening things for fans to watch. But then there are scenes that are straight up gnarly, like Episode 5 of Season 1, when disgraced Kyle Hobart returned to Sam Crow, and Opie noticed that he still has his club tattoo. He was kicked out because he left Opie to deal with the cops himself after an arson job. So the fact that he hadn't gotten his club tattoo removed was a big no-no for Sam Crow. If you're out, your tattoo privileges go out with you. So the members retrained him, and Clay calmly asked him whether he wanted a knife or fire, and the poor guy chooses fire. So Tig grabbed a blowtorch from the garage and burned off his tattoo while the others watched. The whole scene was awful to stomach, but the series wanted to make a big splash back in 2008, and this was the way to do it. And Sutter knew that if he wanted to keep the momentum going, he couldn't take his foot off the gas. So each new season brought fresh twists, cliffhangers, and bloody violence. And if you thought Bobby getting his eye gouged out was too much, you clearly haven't watched the first episode of Season 5. It introduced fans to Damon Pope, the new big bad of the series, and he blamed his daughter's tragic death on Tig Traeger. So he decided to get an eye for an eye and forced Traeger to watch his own daughter get burned alive. The camera didn't cut away, and the fans were forced to watch Dawn's burning body flail around and ask her dad to help her. And the poor guy couldn't do anything but watch his own daughter get roasted to a crisp. And this moment was important to the story, because it established exactly how cold and brutal Pope really was. And Sutter didn't hold back his punches when writing the episode either. If he can create Otto Delaney, then he can do anything. And I'm glad I brought up Otto, because he has some of the most gruesome moments in the show. He's been tortured in more ways than I can count. But getting his eye popped in Episode 5 of Season 1 was arguably the worst. He was all alone in prison, and he knew that if he wanted to survive, he'd have to make his own weapons. And his biggest enemies there were the Aryan brothers. In Episode 5, Otto saw them coming after him, so he snapped the handle off a mop and tried using it as a makeshift weapon. But despite trying his best, the Aryans got the upper hand, and one of them laid him down and used the pointy end of the mop handle to pop his eye. Thank God the camera cut away at the right moment this time. But the sound effects of the wood squishing his eyes were more than enough to make someone puke out their dinner. But Otto's journey doesn't end there, because just a few episodes later, he bit off his own tongue. His life's just a series of unfortunate moments, isn't it? He was one of Sam Crow's most loyal members, but all he got in the end was a prison cell where he was regularly assaulted. There's a reason why Sutter created him, and it was to show that sometimes this is what the club life gives you, and you're left to your own devices in a prison cell where the worst things can happen. But in episode 13, he showed that no matter what happened to him, he'd still be loyal to Sam Crow. So when the interrogators tried getting information out of him, he bit down on his tongue, sliced it off, and spit it at them. He might have been mangled, tortured, and completely damaged, but he was arguably one of the best written characters in the show. He was willing to put it all on the line to make sure Sam Crow was safe, and only a handful of characters have been as loyal as he was. And number one among them is, of course, Gemma. She could do anything to keep Jackson Sam Crow safe, and she proved that in episode 13 of season 6, when she took a carving knife to Tara's head. Fans weren't just shocked by her actions, they were angry, because no one knew that she could do something so horrible to another person, especially if that person was Jack's wife. Gemma was drunk and stoned, and she mistakenly thought that Tara had ratted out Jax in the club, so she waited for her to get home and hit her in the stomach with an iron. But Tara wouldn't stay down. So in order to do that, Gemma picked up a carving knife and stabbed her in the back of the head over and over again. But the worst part comes later, when Sheriff Eli Roosevelt tells Gemma that Tara hadn't ratted anyone out, and that she'd killed her for no reason at all. Fans knew the scene was coming, and yet it surprised them anyway. And it proved that Sutter and his writers knew what they were doing. But even they had a hard time dealing with one of the most tragic and unfair deaths in the series. Don't get me wrong, Tara's death was totally unfair, but nothing comes close to Opie Winston. Even Sutter admitted that he had a hard time killing him off because he was such a fan favorite. But his character arc had come to an end, and it was time to go. So in episode 3 of season 5, Jax had to watch his brother Opie get strapped to a chair and get beaten to a pulp. And what makes it worse is that he was one of the nicest characters in the series, and he was also the most emotionally vulnerable after his wife's death in season 1. So to kill him off in such a brutal way wasn't just gruesome, it broke everyone's heart and left a huge hole in the series after he was gone. So, from Opie's brutal torture and murder in season 5, to August Mark's gouging Bobby's eye out in season 7, those were the most gruesome moments of Sons of Anarchy.